Coming up on today's show.
As our parents are getting older, the greatest generation is getting older, baby boomers are getting older, it's time for people to downsize, or as sometimes we say, right size.
Give us an example of maybe a client who took in a bunch of stuff and maybe had either a house or apartment or something where there just wasn't enough room, and like what they did with the stuff and kind of how you dealt with it.
Okay, we're going to bring in half of their library. Well, do you have room for half of their library? Will you be able to store those keepsakes of theirs properly? I'm curious as to where those 9 boxes are, because a lot of times they end up in someone's attic.
How to deal with inheritance absorption today on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. We hear you inherited something. Well, sometimes that's a good news. Other times you absorb a lot of people's stuff. And we're going to tell you how to deal with that today. And to help us is Julie Ulmer from mindingyourmanor.com. Julie, welcome to Keeping You Organized.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
Now, we have talked about this term, which is called inheritance absorption, which is... You came up with that term, so we need to kind of understand a little bit about, first of all, what that means and how you define that.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of us are experiencing this. We just haven't been able to put our finger on exactly what it is. As our parents are getting older, the greatest generation is getting older, baby boomers are getting older, it's time for people to downsize, or as sometimes we say, right size, which means leaving their homes that they may have been in for 30 or 40 years and perhaps going to a smaller home, then perhaps going to maybe a condo or a retirement village, or, assisted living, that scenario. So what happens is the belongings in those homes are going to be handed down to their loved ones, and it might be in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, if something bad happens and someone has to go into a healthcare situation immediately, or it could happen over a period of years. As our parents are downsizing, they're going to offer us their goods.
Well, as a professional organizer, I'm sure you're seeing this all the time, and it's probably what you call the baby boomers who are dealing with their parents. So let's talk about maybe, give us an example of maybe a client who took in a bunch of stuff and maybe had either a house or apartment or something where there just wasn't enough room, and like what they did with the stuff and kind of how you dealt with it.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to give you a great example. I have tons of clients who are going through this as well, but I went through this myself with my own father, and he had downsized from a large home to a smaller manufactured home, and it was time to downsize even further. And all of a sudden, the poor fella had such depression over this idea of packing and moving that even though we had scheduled it in advance, he refused to do anything. So he got up and left his home, and it was up to myself and my 4 brothers to start dealing with all these belongings. And it took a number of weekends to work through them. So that was like the first wave of things that I inherited from him. Actually, it's the second wave. And then as he downsized again, I brought in more things. And then when he passed away, it was time to finish, bringing everything home from his assisted living situation. And again, another wave of incoming belongings and paperwork came my way. So a lot of people are going through it sometimes in waves. They're also going through it in, unfortunately, immediate situations. And it doesn't mean that you're the executor of the state to have to be going through this. It just means that here comes this stuff, or you're at their home trying to decide what to do with this stuff.
Yeah, I think I went through the exact same situation like you, where we moved the parents from a house to a townhouse, and then after they passed away, you had to clear the townhouse out, and we still have boxes. In fact, ironically, 9 years ago today, the day we're recording this, my father died.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so it is kind of just like bringing back, I remember this as clearly as it was yesterday. and they
Sure.
had a lot of stuff. They were from that
Yeah.
depression era where they felt like once they got something, they have to hold on to it.
Sure.
So, well, let's get into
So
some tips on how you deal with
absolutely.
this.
Sure. Well, the first thing is, are you there on site? Are you nearby your loved ones that you're going to be able to even deal with this? Or are you long distance, which means are you going to be driving there on weekends or taking time off from work to deal with it? But the main thing is to really understand. I mean, we're talking about sometimes homes full of stuff, to really understand how much can you realistically absorb? I mean, you probably already have your own stuff in your own home. Now, if you're upgrading, for instance, if you're going to replace some particle board furniture with a nice antique armoire, by all means, that sounds like a great swap, but it really might be the square footage versus 3D inanimate objects conundrum. And so it's important to think about the one in, one out rule, especially with books, for instance. Okay, we're going to bring in half of their library. Well, do you have room for half of their library? Will you be able to store those keepsakes of theirs properly? I'm curious as to where those 9 boxes are, because a lot of times they end up in someone's attic, or they end up in a basement, or they end up in a storage unit. Are they being stored properly? Meaning, are they what I call an edible, which is, are there potentials for rodents or mice or what have you to dig into things and nibble away? Is it possible that books or photographs could be ruined because of mold or mildew? So there's not just those types of belongings, but there's also paper belongings. Paperwork and photos are a big portion of what's coming into our homes. So it doesn't mean you have to be the executor of the estate. With paperwork, one of the best things that I found useful was putting my loved one, my dad's paperwork, in an expandable file, a portable carrying file, which Smead has, of course, that I could not only utilize, but my brothers could use when they went to visit the attorney or visit the retirement home. And eventually you'll be able to archive a lot of that paper, which is, exciting. But in the meantime, here's this great big box of photos as well. So it's time to reach out to professionals sometimes under these circumstances. And there are professional organizers who specialize in photo organization. And of course, paper organization, lots of professional organizers are handling this. I mean, you're talking about years and years worth of bank statements, and all of a sudden it's coming into your home. What do you do with it?
Right. I've got 2 or 3 things now, 2 or 3 rabbit trails I want to go down, but I want to park on that idea of the document organizer, because we hear from a lot of professional organizers about what solutions they use to organize, and kind of what do you need. Obviously, like when my dad died, he had a couple big file drawers full of stuff, but you kind of want the key documents. Do you kind of have a list, or how do you coach your clients to have maybe that one smaller box or the really essential documents, and what does that look
Sure.
like?
Hopefully, if there had been some forethought and some proactive planning on the part of your loved one, they have done estate planning, and they've hopefully gleaned away a certain amount of the old stuff that we don't need anymore. And their important documents are all being kept in one place, hopefully in a fire security box or in a safe deposit box. But a lot of times we're going into parents' homes or loved ones' homes, and we don't know where those things are. So that can really be difficult. It's easy for someone to just take a banker box and just put all the papers in it, ship it back to their home, and say, I'll just deal with it when I get home. So 2 components. Can we be proactive with our loved ones before they're going through this scenario to glean away some of the bank statements from the 70s, for instance, and just get it down to what the attorneys or what the accountants are asking for paper retention, as opposed to that sweeping movement where we just bring it home and we'll sort it out later. It's best if you can get it, glean through it first before you bring it back.
It seems like a lot of I know, again, dealing with my parents, and you may have experienced this, a lot of times they don't want to talk about that stuff. They don't want to
Sure.
deal with their documents. It's kind of like, you're going to deal with it after we go. Is there some advice you give to people, talking about being proactive, to help them be proactive, or some little tips on, can you discuss these 2 or 3 things or make sure at least these things are taken care of?
Sure, absolutely. First off, it's a hard conversation to have, but it's really necessary to express to our loved ones that our lives are different now. We're obviously busier than perhaps they were back in the day, but the sort of the good news is that there has been something of a whiplash effect where a lot of people have experienced this, older people on their part, where they've had to deal with the Depression era parents who have passed, and they're dealing with thousands of used plastic baggies and whatnot. So they kind of have an idea. Approaching the conversation in a gentle, supportive way is important. And then I think one of the better positive ways is to say, mom or dad or aunt, whoever, I love that set of dishes, and I want to make sure that, do you know who things are going to in the family? Do you know who you want to have what? Because we know that there's lots of squabbles that happen after the fact. What's a good way that we can possibly make sure that your precious belongings go to either the people or the institutions that you want them to? And then I suggest a video tour. And that is something that really can be helpful while people are alive, just to do a walking tour. Most of us have videos on our phone or handycam, just to do a walking tour. And instead of it being angled towards who gets what, which seems grabby, how about it's more towards, Mom, can you tell me about this bureau? I know it's really old, but where did it come from? Who did it belong to? So you're getting a dual fold situation. You're getting the provenance in the background of things, and you're also finding out that, Mom may say, I really want that to go to cousin Jimmy, or I really want that to go to you. Or it might be even important historical documents that go to a local historical society.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal idea. Just to take that and to get it done while they still have the ability to, their senses to talk and stuff like that. I know that it might be a long video because there's a lot of stories hidden in that stuff. And we're gonna take a quick break here, and when we come back, I want to touch on that because it seems like there's 2 camps of stuff. There's the stuff that you have to deal with, but then there's the stuff that there's a lot of emotion around that may not be worth keeping on a practical basis, but there's some emotion involved with it. So we want to touch on that. We're talking with Julie Ulmer from mindyourmanor.com about inheritance absorption, and we'll be right back. When you've got it together, everyone can tell. Your confidence is obvious. Introducing Viewables.com from Smead. Use the Viewables labeling system to transform your drawer of hanging files into a tidy, organized filing system. Using the premium hanging folder tabs, see the label from the front, top, and back. It's easy. Access Viewables.com from any computer, tablet, or internet-enabled smartphone. Let's make some labels. It's free, and there's nothing to download or install. Choose the label type and format your label just the way you want. You can even add index characters or icons for distinctive filing. Set up a free Viewables cloud account, and your secure login lets you save your projects for convenient access from any computer. And with Viewables multi-purpose labels, you can use one label for any type of file, including hanging folders, top tab folders, super tab folders, or oversized items like notebooks and file boxes. Upload a list of file headings and print your complete set of labels in moments. There's even a library of templates for commonly used label sets. It's never been easier to set up neat-looking files that have easy-to-read headings and efficient color codes. Obviously organized. Viewables.com. From Smead, keeping you organized. We are back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about how to deal with inheritance absorption. That term means the stuff that you get maybe through an inheritance passed down to you, and integrating it with the stuff that you already have. And a lot of us feel overwhelmed with all the stuff we already have. Then when we take on somebody else's stuff, it gets even more. Julie Ulmer is with us today. Julie, you are a professional organizer. You deal with people on this situation a lot. I think you even coined the term inheritance absorption. I don't know if you have it trademarked or not, but it is a situation. Now, before the break, we talked about dealing with the idea of a video tour, trying to talk in advance, be proactive. But let's talk, because this is something from my family as well. You have these things that you remember, like when you were a kid. There was a candy jar we had at Christmas, and we had 6 kids in our family, and everyone we want this candy jar. It was probably something they paid 50 cents for. How do you deal with those emotional items that, especially as you're dealing with maybe limited space where you're bringing it in, you bring all this stuff into your house. How do you decide what to keep and what not to keep?
Okay, well, I think that you're absolutely right that it could be something as innocent as a candy jar. It could be something sentimental that you would think doesn't have really any ties. For instance, I'm missing somewhere belongs a prism that my dad used to have, just a triangular prism, and I used to put it up to my eyes and walk and watch the living room floor, round off. Who would think that that's something sentimental to someone? However, it is. I have a client who was devastated that her husband got rid of a lunchbox that belonged to her father. It was an old junky lunchbox, and he didn't think it had any value, but her father's name was on it in his handwriting, and that was the last example of his handwriting she had, and it was devastating to her. So again, with the proactive thing, I like the idea of approaching our older loved ones and saying to them, you know what, I want to go over the story again behind that prism, Dad, or I want to talk about that candy dish, where did it come from? And, I would love to have it. Do you mind if that's something that I can have further down the line? And I don't want to say it's calling dibs, but giving those opportunities to older people to dedicate who gets what gives them control of their own belongings, which I think is very important. However, sometimes they will just turn a blind eye to everything because they can't deal with it and say, you guys sort it out, figure it out after I'm gone. You're on your own. Then there's those potentials for squabbles that can, happen. And I hope that it's just an opportunity for people to be honest with each other and say, listen, if you really want the drill, fine. I can buy a new drill anywhere, anytime. But that little whatever that really means something to me, that's what I really would like to keep. How can we work this out?
Yeah, let's talk about that a second. If you have several siblings, again, we had 6. How do you decide, maybe the person's passed on, who gets what? Do you have any kind of tips on maybe how to divvy things up?
Sure. Take a deep breath, everyone. And, it's important to give everyone the opportunity to kind of create their own little keepsake containers so much. It doesn't have to be, it might be a big piece of furniture that someone's hankering after, but it could just be some of the letters, some of the photographs. And if the siblings can get together and create perhaps a box of memories for each sibling from their loved one's belongings, I think that's a good way to try to divvy it out. When it comes down to squabbles, sometimes an outside voice, an unbiased voice, might be able to help things. Believe it or not, I had a cranberry glass salt and pepper set that were my grandparents that I wanted desperately just because it reminded me of their dining room table. My sister snuck off with it, and it really burned me for many years. And I let her know it burned me for many years. When she moved, she finally decided, you know what? I really don't like the salt and pepper shaker very much. Would you like it back? And I was like, yes, I would like it back. Thank you very much. So it might not be resolved right away. Here's the basic thing. We need to keep memories, not things. So the idea that really did bother me, the salt and pepper shaker, guess what? I have pictures of family gatherings with the salt and pepper shaker on the table, and it was easier for me when I didn't have it in my grasp to look at those pictures and go, I do remember them. The memory of them is here and alive, even if I don't have them in my hot little hands.
Well, that dovetails perfectly into what I want to talk about next is photographs. Now,
Mm,
maybe as time goes on, there's more and more digital, but in the case of my parents, there were boxes and boxes and boxes of
mhm.
photos. How do you deal with the photos? What's a good technique for that? And not only dispersing them, but what to keep. And unfortunately, you hate to throw any photo, but I mean, they
Sure.
even kept the out of focus ones.
Sure, sure. Well, that's a perfect point. Out of focus, goodbye. It's not doing anybody any good whatsoever. You might find a lot of landscape photos. Again, if it's Mount Hood in Oregon, guess what? There's lots of pictures of Mount Hood in Oregon that you could refer to. So landscape photos can go. What ends up happening though is people get these boxes of photos, and are there people in there that they have no clue who they are? There's been no designation whatsoever. So how long are we going to keep this kind of stuff? Is there anything in the background that would lead us to think that this has any historical reference, or, is this a piece of ephemera that might actually, do better in a local museum, perhaps? If it's, an old building in the center of town, it might be something that they would be interested in. Digital copies for everyone in the family of the best of the photos is possible nowadays. So that's really great. It keeps, people from squabbling over, photographs. But the landscape ones, the blurry ones, the people we really don't know, it's also good to, and again, this is proactive. Um, when my father was older, I brought the old photographs to him, and I had him sit down. I said, this is your homework. Who are these people? And had him jot on the back who these people were. And actually, we noticed a little bit of his dementia because he was swapping out some names, but there were some that he himself had put a question mark on. You know what? That was easier for me to get rid of it. If he didn't know who this person was, I'm surely not going to know who this person was either. So it was easier for me to let it go.
Yeah, and I think, at some point you have to draw the line and say, here are 4 or 5 really good pictures of this, experience or this time in our life, and the rest of the stuff does have to go.
Sure. Keep the best of the best and lose the rest. That goes for photos, keepsakes, belongings, material possessions, etc. Memories too.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. Do you have any other tips for helping us deal with this inheritance absorption before we're done?
One of the things when you're thinking about what you want to keep, a lot of times people are thinking, I would like to pass this on to the next generation. Try not to. We don't know what future generations are really going to want to have. And are you really able to be a steward of that possession? Are you really going to manage that belonging and pass it on down to your kids? So I think it's a good idea to keep what is special to you and not what future or what you think future generations will appreciate.
That's awesome advice. Well, listen, before we go, let's talk about your company, the kinds of services you provide, and how people can get a hold of you.
Sure. Well, there's absolutely my decluttering services, downsizing for anybody, or right sizing as we call it sometime, whether they be seniors or just your average person who wants to have less and reclaim their space. I help with the moving and relocation aspect of moving people on to their next chapter in the next life, and home management as well. So it's www.mindingyourmanor.com, and on there is where you can find me on all of social media, and my blog is on there as well. And so people are welcome to catch up with me on social media so that we can talk back and forth and share stories and tips and ideas.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Julie, thank you so much. We hopefully now will have a little bit more ability to take and keep just the things we need and keep some room for our other stuff as well. So we'll have you back again.
Awesome.
So Julie Ulmer, mindingyourmanor.com, today on Keeping You Organized.